This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Mozambique rivals set to sign final peace deal. Migrant deaths off the Mediterranean increased significantly in recent months. And harsh weather conditions threaten more than 15 million livelihoods across Horn of Africa. Hello and welcome to CGTN. This is Africa Live and I'm Karen Roberts in Nairobi. Also coming up in the programme. In business, Zimbabwe raises fuel prices up for the 6th time this year. And in sport, South Africa's greatest wicket taker, Dale Steyn, retires from Test cricket. Let's begin in southern Africa, where Mozambique's former rebel group Renamo and the government are set to sign the final peace deal, which will formally end hostilities 27 years after the end of the first civil war. This comes days after President Philippe Nyusi and current Renamo leader Osufo Nomade agreed to end military hostilities. Renamo is currently an opposition party. Its former leader, Alphonse Dhlakama, died last May from a heart attack. Although the civil war that started in 1977 ended in 1992, the collapse of a peace deal led to another round of conflict between 2013 and 2016. This happened after government forces raided Renamo's bush camp in central regions. Even after transforming itself into an opposition party, Renamo has retained an armed wing. Well, let's get you more on this. We are now joined by Gideon Chitanga, a regional analyst with PESA, that's a political economy think tank in South Africa. Thank you very much for joining us. Finally, a peace deal after nearly 30 years of hostilities between ex-rebel group turned opposition party Renamo and the government. How significant would you say this deal is to Mozambique and the wider South African region?
I think this is a very important deal. Mozambique surely needs peace and stability. It is also important for the region in the sense that it allows the sub-region to concentrate on peacefully dealing with conflicts in the sense of either domestically or other players helping SADC member countries to stabilize the regional community. So given that Mozambique has been in conflict for 3 decades, and these conflicts has been sort of intermittent in between a sense of stability, then the conflict comes back and so on. There is hope that this would be maybe the final stroke that will end the Mozambican conflict and focus the country holistically on a socio-economic trajectory that can address the concerns of Mozambicans and concerns of people in the sub-region.
And let's talk a little bit about the sustainability of this deal. It's not the first attempt to secure a lasting peace deal between the 2 longtime rivals. What will it take to ensure that it holds, would you say?
So just looking at the deal and the way the Mozambican leadership have arrived at the stage where they are, the negotiations have been top-heavy, and it seems to me that there is appetite from the key leaders within Renamo and Momade himself to at least allow some kind of peace that will allow them to at least reintegrate into normal life and normal politics. But so in spite of that significant signs that they are committed to peace and to engage with the government and to return to civilized political engagement that is non-military, there are challenges in the sense that if you look at how this pact was arrived at, the involvement of key elites, without necessarily having a clear strategy of dealing with the militants, especially on the side of Renamo, the non-involvement of broader society, particularly civil society, and more the provision of incentives at the top without looking at a very sustainable, holistic way of dealing with Renamo militants. We know that the part of the agreement is that 5,200 militants will be demobilized, they will hand over their arms and so on. But that is not adequate because Mamadi himself does not have firm total control of Renamo. It is understood that there are other factional elements within Renamo which are opposed to the agreement. And I think that the major threat from this agreement will be from these intra-factionalists within Renamo who are not convinced that the agreement is inclusive enough. So for this part of the agreement, for it not to repeat what we have seen with other agreements before, I think the government should escalate the negotiations to bring in other parties beyond Mamadi, the head of the formal head of Renamo, and perhaps also engage other societal structures and especially civil society. On the socio-economic level, it is very important to understand that there is a whole society that is nucleated around the interests that are expressed by Renamo. So socio-economic benefits and rents should be seen to trickle down to the lowest person, individual in the community, so that people start to believe in the political system and to benefit from its public goods. And that way we will see, I think, in the medium to the long term, a sense of more stability, more confidence, more trust in the system and in the leadership of Mozambique, both opposition and ruling.
So, Mr. Chitanga, you have outlined some of the challenges there. The agreement comes just months before general elections on October the 15th. How do you think these developments are likely to affect the elections?
I actually think that in one sense that could be an opportunity, especially if this agreement comes with very clear pre-election clauses, which sort of mechanism to distribute power. But such mechanisms should also be balanced by post-election scenarios to ensure that, to mitigate the uncertainty of electoral contestation. So elections should not be a method to exclude other parties from governing, but they should be seen as a model of distributing power and dispersing power to all key brokers, and as a conflict management mechanism, the distribution of votes could be used to translate into a distribution of power that accommodates both Frelimo and Renamo, and possibly other disgruntled elements who could potentially be spoilers to this pact.
Okay, thank you very much for your analysis. That was Gideon Chitanga there, a regional analyst with PSA, that's a political economy think tank in South Africa. Moving on to Somalia now. The country is among several Horn of Africa nations affected by severe weather conditions in recent years. Aid agencies now warn that if immediate action is not taken, other countries in the region will soon suffer a similar fate. CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo reports now from Mogadishu.
Harsh weather patterns in recent months is threatening more than 15 million people across the Horn of Africa, according to recent findings. A third of that number is from Somalia, that has fallen victim to climate change that continues to affect livelihood for farmers and pastoralists. Last month, the Somali government met key donors in Mogadishu to discuss accelerating recovery and resilience after the country suffered recent floods, drought and a tropical cyclone.
We have experienced heavy floods during the rainy season and will experience devastating drought if the rains fail. This has had a chilling effect on the economy. We want to seek long-term strategies on how we can take advantage and store rainwater during the rainy season in order to alleviate suffering for our pastoralists and farmers in case we don't receive enough rainfall.
The government and partner aid agencies earlier this year launched a humanitarian appeal of over $1 billion to assist more than 3.4 million people displaced by drought and years of conflict. However, competing humanitarian crises in several parts of the world, including Yemen and Syria, has shifted the global attention from Somalia barely 6 years after a deadly famine killed 250,000 people here in Somalia, the worst humanitarian disaster to hit the Horn of African nation in more than 6 decades.
We understand the frustration that people have of year-on-year appeals for hundreds of millions of dollars in humanitarian aid. We have the same frustration, and we dedicate all of the UN agencies' work to finding these solutions, supporting the government and the federal member states. It's quite clear there is a consensus across the nation that it is time to move forward with solutions, and the United Nations is very happy to play its part in support of the federal government and the member states in doing so.
Humanitarian agencies say that below average rainfall was also recorded in the past months, significantly impacting planting and germination. Drought has also affected the livestock sector, Somalia's principal source of livelihood. Meanwhile, the country has commenced exporting livestock to Gulf countries again ahead of Muslim festivities next week. Analysts now say that unless authorities come up with resilience programs, millions more will be affected in the coming months. Abdulaziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
The humanitarian group SOS Mediterranee has launched its new rescue ship Ocean Viking from the French port of Marseille for its first mission to save migrants off the coast of Libya. The group had halted its missions with its Aquarius ship in December 2018 after they said it was blocked by some EU governments. The UN Migrant Agency says at least 840 people have gone missing so far this year trying to cross from Libya's coastline to reach Europe, most of them in the central Mediterranean. Last week, up to 150 migrants, including women and children, died after the boats that they were travelling in capsized in the Mediterranean Sea off Libya. Libya remains a major and dangerous transit route for migrants, mostly from sub-Saharan Africa, trying to reach Europe. Meanwhile, EU member states continue to disagree on how to handle the migrant situation. Well, for more on this situation, we are now joined by Dr. Ziad Akel, a political analyst and researcher at the Ahram Center for Security and Strategic Studies. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Akel. This year's migrant death toll in the central Mediterranean is at least 600. Do you think that efforts currently in place are adequate to deal with this situation?
Well, first of all, hello. It's always good to be here. I believe that no, the efforts are inadequate. First of all, there should have been a lot of efforts by the international community to protect border security in Libya, which actually leads to the fact that lots of these migrants manage to cross the Libyan borders, and at the same time there is absolutely again inadequate work by the UN to work on the conflict, which facilitates the access of migrants into Libya, and therefore there's also not enough humanitarian aid for the places where these migrants are held when they are when they are arrested in the Mediterranean across the coasts of Tripoli. So there are many things that could be done to improve the situation, but the main thing is the ongoing conflict and the criminal militias who actually work within the process of illegal immigration inside Libya.
Well, we're going to talk about that in a moment, the conflict and that impact on migrants and refugees. You're talking about the need for mechanisms to be put in place in Libya. Well, interception and detention policies have been put in place to curb the migrant flow to Europe, but the human price, as you say, being paid by migrants in Libya is still high. What more can be done to prevent this, would you say?
Well, first of all, I think that all these detention centers are not in favor of the migrants whatsoever, and they are actually one of the points that make Europe support one side. Like, for example, if we see Italy is trying to curb the level of immigrants, of illegal immigration coming to its coasts through Libya, so they are supporting Faisal Sarraj, who is actually making these detention centers and running them. So this is one of the things that make the conflict more acute. So what could be done more for this is first of all, there must be through the UN, and this is maybe something that Ghassan Salame should take care of instead of trying to hold negotiations, is to actually improve the conditions at the detention centers, and at the same time to have more border security. And again, this is something that the UN should be responsible of. There should be more forces within the southern Libyan border because it is very, very accessible and there is not enough security for the border in the south.
So you are advocating more from the United Nations. The EU is facing growing criticism over the plight of migrants as the conflict worsens in Libya. What viable long-term solutions need to be adopted to save thousands of lives that are still being lost at sea?
Well, first of all, the EU must reach a policy, a mutual policy, and have inside or internal consensus over its position in Libya, because the EU does not act as an organization in Libya. It started to act maybe a year ago as independent states. So this is one of the things. The other is there needs to be a fund, a military fund from the EU to improve the humanitarian conditions in the detention centers, and there should be, on the political level or the political perspective, a more effort done to negotiate with the warring parties, with both Khalifa Haftar and Faisal Sarraj in Libya, because the inflow of migrants is closely connected to the idea that the conflict is still going on, and these lives, even if they are so desperate so that they try to illegally immigrate, they deserve humanitarian conditions if they are arrested. So the EU, yes, has a lot of laws that govern illegal immigration, but at least if you are trying to put ships within Libyan waters to bring immigrants back to Libya, then at least you make their conditions in their detention centers more acceptable.
Okay, thank you very much for your analysis. That was Dr. Ziad Akil there, a political analyst and researcher at the Ahram Center for Security and Strategic Studies. We are going to a short break now. Don't go away, lots more to come, including we see how one Boko Haram survivor is creating business opportunities inside IDP camp. And descendants of former slaves recount how Liberia was founded 400 years on.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice.
A Nigerian court has granted a Shiite Muslim cleric who has been in detention since 2015 permission to travel to India for urgent medical treatment. Ibrahim el-Zakzaki, leader of the Islamic movement in Nigeria, has been in detention despite a court order for his release. The court ruling on his release comes days after the government banned his group and declared it a terrorist organization. CGTN's Deji Badmus has more.
It's the news that supporters of the controversial Shiite Islamic cleric had been waiting for since 2015 when he was arrested and detained by the government. Lawyers to Ibrahim el-Zakzaki and his wife had asked the court to order their release from detention so they could get urgent medical attention in India. The court has now obliged their request, ordering their release.
There were 8 different medical reports that showed clearly that the applicants are in dire need of urgent medical treatment abroad. So the court was also of the view that the life of the applicants must be saved urgently.
We are bound by the court ruling of this honorable court. All the parties are bound by the ruling of the court. So as soon as he's discharged from the hospital, he returns to the country to continue his trial.
Nigeria's secret police, the Department of State Services, DSS, under whose custody Mr. el-Zakzaki and his wife are, has confirmed receiving the ruling of the court and says it will comply with it. So what that effectively means is that the Shiite cleric and his wife would be out of detention at any moment and be on their way to India for the medical treatment. State government officials are expected to accompany them on the trip. Now, whether all of these new developments would finally put an end to protests by Mr. el-Zakzaki's supporters remains to be seen. They haven't held any protests since the government banned the group and designated it a terrorist organization. They're challenging that in court, though. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
To other news now, 6 patients have been discharged in the city of Goma after testing negative for the Ebola virus in the Democratic Republic of Congo. 12 more people are being tested for possible infection. Goma is the capital of North Kivu province, which has suffered from the year-old epidemic that has claimed more than 1,800 lives. This comes days after 3 patients in the city tested positive for the disease. A 1-year-old girl whose father died from Ebola became the 3rd patient to test positive. Her mother, who is also infected, and the young girl are now in a stable condition.
She had signs that may be related to the disease. She had fever, abdominal pain, headaches, vomiting and diarrhea. So the monitoring and investigation team preferred to do the test first.
I am very happy to see that my child was taken for checkup. I cried a lot because I was afraid I could lose my 15-year-old child. It shocked me a lot. I was crying really hard. Since I just saw her healthy, I'm now really happy.
Now to Liberia, and a direct descendant of a freed slave, the granddaughter of slain President William Richard Talbot Jr., has recounted how the country was founded when settlers colonized a piece of land in West Africa in 1822, 50 years before the end of slavery. Let's now take a look.
Water Street in Monrovia is a bustling market today. It was one of the first streets drawn on the grid-like plans to build the city of Monrovia the capital of Liberia, a country that established the first black government of Africa, founded by born-free and freed slaves from America and the Caribbean.
I just want to show you the ship that my grandparents' father came on as a child. This is called the Azor, not a steamship, but a sailing ship. And it brought many families at this time.
After surviving more than 200 years of slavery in America, born frees and freed slaves were given the chance by the American Colonization Society to live on their own land and set up their own system of governance and justice. It became very apparent that persisting challenges in America would make this impossible, and the only solution was returning to Africa. The very first ships did not land in Liberia, but in neighboring Sierra Leone's Ashabo Island, where the swampy conditions led a high number of new arrivals to die.
Most of the people, a great percentage of them, died during the first month or two of their arrival in Liberia. They died from malaria. They died from, they call it the African fever, but many of them died again just because there was a serious engagement trying to stop slave trading that was prevalent in this region. Many of them perished, but they rather perished on this side than perished in slavery.
The American Library of Congress writes that from 1827 onwards, slave states from North America were increasingly interested in getting rid of free African American populations.
When there's terror, people move. And there was a period in history when Black Americans, some of them chose to stay, and that was their right. Some of them chose to leave, that was their right, but they came for a chance to have a better life.
Some of the early settlements were in Edina, in Grand Bassa County, where the first Baptist church was built and former presidents were buried. 69-year-old Reverend Emmanuel Bowier is a direct descendant of indigenous Liberians.
So the Bassa and the Vai, they were the two groups that opposed openly, the Bassa and the Vai. And they told the Americo-Liberian authorities here, we'll never join this republic unless you agree on one thing, and that is white people will never be citizens, white people will never own land. It's in the history book of Liberia.
For a long time, Liberia did not perceive itself as a nation. But the history of the country from the early 19th century through the devastating civil war, Liberia has finally become a nation in which power is transferred peacefully and democratically, though its evolution still calls for an end to divisions that hamper the rebuilding of the nation. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
The Chinese embassy in South Africa has hosted a cultural celebration to mark the 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. The event also showcased the achievements of Chinese language teaching in South Africa over the past 10 years. CGTN's Yulisa Njamela has more.
South Africa ascribes great value to its relations with China. In the past 20 years, China-South Africa relations have developed from a partnership to a strategic partnership and then to a comprehensive strategic partnership. The two countries have witnessed increasing political mutual trust, practical cooperation, people-to-people exchanges, and strategic coordination. It is thus fitting for South Africa to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. China has over the years ensured that it builds solid relations with many countries by, amongst other things, sending students to many countries to promote those relations.
As a civilized and open country, China is humble to learn from all the civilizations in the world. Over a year, we send millions of students out of China. Most of them millions of students go to American, European Union, and other developed countries. Of course, we also send some of them to the developing countries, such as South Africa. We also have. It's those students who learn a lot from abroad, from the developed country, who have greatly promoted the mutual understanding, friendship, and cooperation between China and the people all over the world.
China is South Africa's largest trading partner, while South Africa is China's largest trading partner in Africa. Leaders of both countries continue to ensure that relations are not only enjoyed at leadership level.
We have succeeded in narrowing the gap between our two countries through this program, but more important are peoples-to-peoples relationship, knowledge, and cultural exchanges through language and culture.
A scholar who has spent substantial time in China attests that there's a strong interest on the part of Chinese people to know more about Africa and its peoples.
In fact, there's a strong inherent desire to see more and more people-to-people cultural, education, vocational training exchanges, not only in the interest of economic development and growth, but also in creating a better mutual understanding and respect.
This event also hailed the achievements of the Chinese language teaching in South Africa over the past 10 years. A number of events will take place around the country to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
We have got all the business news coming up for you after the break, including Zimbabwe raises fuel prices up for the 6th time this year. And Abidjan hosts summit on trade between US and sub-Saharan Africa.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Zimbabwe has once again raised the prices of fuel by as much as 26%. This is the 4th time the government has increased fuel prices since June. Since January, the price of fuel in the country has risen by more than 500%. The hikes follow last week's decision by the Finance Ministry to raise import tax on fuel, adding more pressure on citizens grappling with triple-digit inflation. However, most pumps across Zimbabwe still remain dry. The government is trying to end subsidies by raising the value of fuel and electrical energy tariffs and placing its funds on a powerful footing. However, the move is raising inflation and eroding salaries in the southern African economy. The United States and Côte d'Ivoire are co-hosting the African Growth and Opportunity Act Forum in the Ivorian capital of Abidjan. It brings together senior government officials from the United States and 39 sub-Saharan African countries to discuss ways to boost economic cooperation and trade between the United States and Africa. The private sector, civil society and regional economic communities will also participate.
Significant hurdles are still to be overcome to enable African countries to fully benefit from access to the vast American market of 350 million consumers.
We will combine the promise of the AFCFTA with these new U.S. initiatives to help maximize the potential of U.S.-Africa trade.
Millions of Nigerians, especially local businessmen and women in rural areas, don't have access to banking services. At the moment, only about 60% of the country's roughly 100 million adults use bank accounts. That's despite the central bank setting a target to achieve around 80% financial inclusion by next year. CGTN's Philihauser explains.
Sarah Teva sells grocery items at this small roadside market on the outskirts of Abuja. Teva has never opened a bank account before, and she says due to financial difficulty, she doesn't see the need to.
This is what I know like. Let me say I know like.
I don't make use of banks because the little profit I make from this petty trade is not even enough to feed my family, pay my children's school fees and other bills. So there's no money. That's why I haven't opened a bank account yet.
Open account. That is why I no open.
The Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, set up a national financial inclusion strategy in 2012 to help achieve its goal of improving adult financial inclusion rate in the country from about 46% in 2010 to as low as 20% by 2020. One of the strategies by the Apex Bank is for bankers to sensitize local traders on the importance of banking services in a bid to get them to register. Operating bank accounts could give access to a range of affordable financial services, also known as financial inclusion. However, experts say it's an enormous task changing the mindset of local traders.
One of the challenges we tend to encounter is about social, physiological factors. Most customers, most micro traders have this natural belief of keeping their money at home because they just believe that they can easily have access to it, forgetting that they can as well tamper their daily savings. And two, they just feel that the bank tend to have too many charges. But then, currently, the charges have been dropped.
With 1 year left to go, about 40 million more micro traders are still unbanked. In order to close up this gap, the Apex Bank has mandated all commercial banks to open at least 1,500 savings accounts per month, while microfinance banks have a target of 2,500 per month. Experts say the goal is still achievable if more banks comply with the CBN's directive.
I will actually encourage every deposit money bank and every microfinance bank to actually key into this initiative, because by so doing, we are bringing our physical presence to the market, go from shop to petty traders to open these bank accounts, because we believe that by telling them in details, we can be able to boost their daily savings, because if we don't tell them one-on-one, they might think that it's really ambiguous and not possible to access these banks.
The Apex Bank reports a progress of about 60% financial inclusion for adults so far and is optimistic of achieving its target of 80% by next year.
Many experts believe that having more financial institutions in rural areas to provide a range of affordable financial services to low-income earners will rapidly increase their productivity. They say that will positively impact Africa's largest economy. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
The China foreign exchange trade system shows that the yuan steadied against the US dollar on Tuesday after the central bank set midpoint at 6.9683. The PBOC also announced to issue 30 billion yuan bills in Hong Kong next Wednesday. Meanwhile, the US accused China of manipulating its currency after China let the yuan drop to its lowest point in more than a decade on Monday. The US Treasury Department announced that Secretary Stephen Mnuchin will engage with the International Monetary Fund to eliminate what the US has called an unfair competitive advantage created by China. The IMF said last month that China's yuan was broadly in line with economic fundamentals, while the US dollar was overvalued by 6% to 12%. This is just in. China's central bank posted a statement on its official website to respond to US Treasury's currency manipulation label, saying the label could not even meet the US's own quantitative criteria for currency manipulation. The PBOC said the move not only showed unilateralism and protectionism, but also violated international rules and will greatly impact the global economy. The PBOC reiterated that China has always insisted on the market-oriented forex policy entering August. Weakening of the currency is due to such factors or dynamics of the world economy and the escalation of trade frictions. Well, according to data from Bank for International Settlements, the nominal and real effective exchange rate of renminbi has appreciated by 38% and 47% respectively, becoming one of the strongest major currencies among G20 economies. China has never and will not engage in competitive devaluation, and the US has no grounds at all to accuse China. So the PBOC said it suggests the US to come back to a rational and objective term, and the PBOC will stick to a floating exchange rate system and maintain the yuan at a reasonably stable equilibrium. Smartphone makers around the world are embracing the new generation of communication by launching 5G mobile devices. Many in and outside the industry view Chinese tech giant Huawei as a global leader in the field. But what lies within many of its products and devices is often forgotten. Our reporter Omar Khan paid a visit to one of Huawei's tech labs in South China to get a closer look at some of the core technologies the company has developed.
With the unveiling of the Mate 20X smartphone, Huawei is ushering in the 5G era. But behind the glamour of the final product, and perhaps out of the spotlight, lies years of research and development.
Since the year 2009, Huawei already invested around $4 billion in the 5G basic technology development, standard development, and also the equipment development.
The Shenzhen-based firm has over 80,000 people working in R&D, accounting for nearly 50% of its workforce. And at one of Huawei's many labs in South China, a range of experiments and tests are being carried out to fuel the 5G rollout. Here at Huawei's Advanced Thermal Laboratory, scientists are exploring the latest in heat dissipation technology for 5G base stations. And it's exactly these units that will eventually power 5G networks and coverage. There's also this structure material lab, which was established back in 2012. Since then, engineers have studied the impact of harsh weather conditions and diverse environments on 5G equipment. Scientists say the units will have to be able to withstand corrosive substances, fluctuating temperatures, and water.
So we've got coating technologies to avoid snow or water accumulation on the surface of antenna cover to make sure that the covered snow won't prohibit signal transmission.
These base stations will eventually be placed outdoors in various exposed areas. Engineers are using in-house developed technology known as active cooling and two-phase cooling to ensure that networks powered by these base stations can handle any climate.
For 5G, the heat is also another problem. So the heat generated by 5G chips is far more than the 4G chips. So here we'll also have material technology for heat dissipation.
Given Huawei's unique positioning within the 5G industry, it should come as no surprise that the company wants to deliver a product that so many people are eager to experience. From a business standpoint, their determination in R&D is translating into commercial success.
Until now, Huawei already signed more than 50 commercial contracts, 5G contracts, with the global leading operator. And also we already shipped more than 150,000 pieces of base stations. We are deploying and the operator are commercializing the 5G network right now.
With 5G-enabled phones set to be in consumers' hands in just a few weeks, what lies underneath the cover may well be an afterthought. But for Huawei and their efforts, that's a reality they'll gladly take. Omar Khan, CGTN, Dongguan, Guangdong Province.
We're going to a short break now. Don't go away, lots more to come, including famed Kenyan artist creates art in celebration of culture and the environment.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Celebrated Kenyan artist John Dianga has played a crucial role in establishing visual art in Kenya. Dianga's towering forms can be seen at his centre in Pangulu Pangala in Kisumu. Now in his 70s, he has showcased his pieces in both Africa and abroad. He's calling on younger artists to invest in developing their talent and urges African governments to establish art hubs to celebrate the continent's rich culture.
It's like they are holding the globe.
His is a legacy that spans more than 5 decades. John Dianga is a silent legend who explores his expression in various art forms, from painting to sculpting, both large and small pieces, to performing visual arts on TV and on stage.
Around 71, I started now exhibiting outside, Nairobi and other places. So the journey started in 68 of exposure.
Like an art piece tells a story, John Dianga has evolved in his use of various media, wood, clay, soapstone, and now cement to bring forth the message.
Cement will stay forever if you use it, unlike clay. And cement is the most common material you can now use permanently for sculptural activities.
Statements of history and social cultural issues are erected in his delicately balanced ecosystem of art and nature.
She is capturing what's happening in this society today, and I did it particularly to help caution our students around Maseno and students in the environment about early pregnancies.
And on the very delicate issue of gender equality, Dianga captured the existing struggle in a towering, insurmountable, almost 12-foot form, naturally prompting a short discussion on the never-ending topic.
Pride emanates from the kind of pampering. We have given them a lot of support in terms of materials and in terms of money, to the extent that they live more comfortably than the boy child. And he's saying, please accept me back. And this girl looks down and says, Kazibure, you're wasting your time. If you look at her face, she's facing away from the young man. The young man is drunk, and this is what is happening to our society today.
He also celebrates a time past in African food culture.
This is a grinding stone, as it is, and you would put your millet or muogo. Maize was not easy because you would have first to crack it down and then you grind it.
Dianga looks back and celebrates his legacy with a hope to inspire the future generation.
Like now, I'm turning 74 next month. I'm still marching on. My target, serious target, is students, the upcoming children. They visit here, and when they come here, they live here fired. We need more of this kind of thing all over, so that they can see what they can do with themselves, they can see what they can handle with their hands creatively. It will help.
He has created a universe documenting Kenya and Africa's journey through art in the hopes that this will remind the world of stories that were and should not be forgotten. Beryl Oro, CGTN, Kisumu, Kenya.
As Africa's fashion industry continues to grow, designers from around the continent are promoting African culture by using local fabric. This trend was on full display at Uganda's International Fashion Week in Kampala. Isabel Nakiria reports.
Models decked out in African prints hit the runway at Uganda's International Fashion Week. For the designers, these shows were about more than just fashion.
I think that we have so much interesting stories to tell and the world wants to hear it.
This event has drawn designers from all over the continent, and they are showcasing unique collections of African fabric with the aim of encouraging and promoting the African culture. Many of this year's designs have been praised as ready for the market.
Most of the times on the runways we have things that are extremely creative but not realistically wearable. So with this showcase this time, it was all things that you can wear, and it's good, it's fresh.
Many of the designers are looking into selling their products beyond Africa's borders. Tourism experts say fashion has the potential to sell the African image internationally.
One thing it has done is brought out the creativity. There are different pieces like the kikoi that was used, that is very Ugandan, and the awareness that this has created, not only in Uganda but internationally. It's great for Uganda, it's great for fashion industry in Uganda, but also for tourism.
For these fashion designers, the goal is to continue to craft creative designs that will be a hit both at home and around the world. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala.
All the sports news coming up for you after the break, including